Welcome to Horror TV. This is your host, Killenberg. For this episode, I'm going to be reviewing episode 5 of Bates Motel, which is titled Ocean View. The episode starts with recaps of previous episodes, and we see Bradley and Norman getting dressed. Then we see him walk on the street with his coat. Well, he's holding his coat. He goes back to the house. We see Dylan eating breakfast. Norman walks in and they say hey to each other. Norman asks if Norma's asleep. Dylan says she's in jail. In the jail, we see Norma sitting there. Norman and Dylan show up, and Norman asks how she is. She says she's been better. Norman asks how they can help. Dylan says her bill is set at $100,000 and asks if she has that lying around. She doesn't answer. Dylan says what he thought. He suggests using the motel as collateral. She tells them to get the hell out of there, and she says she doesn't need their help. Dylan tries to talk to her, but she yells, "Get out of here." Norman stays and says he wants to help her. She looks away, so he leaves. We see the opening for the show. We see Norman going through files. Emma rings the bell. Emma says she heard about Norma going to jail. He asks how she knew. She said big news in a small town. She says she's sorry because it's gotta suck. And she tells him he's welcome to stay with her. But he mentions, Dylan. He finds the deed to the motel. He says it might help him get Norma out. Emma offers to take him. He says sure, thanks. Now in the woods, Dylan is asking if the guys they work for will pay him in advance. Ethan asks how much. He says $5,000. Ethan laughs. He brought up people who owe them money. Dylan says he wants to get his own place. In the cell, an officer opened the door. It's Shelby with a tray of food. She says she's not hungry. He says she should eat something. She says she doesn't care about food right now. He walks out. Emma takes Norman to the bail bonds. John wasn't there. John's like the owner. He tells Emma he found the girl. She was shocked and says it's a police conspiracy. She says they have to get her out. Norman says he wants to do something about it. He just can't because he has to do something about his mom. Emma says she gets it and they kiss. The owner shows up. Norman says thanks for bringing me. Emma asks if she did it and says she wouldn't blame her. He says no. Back at the house, we see Norman texting someone. He starts remembering him kissing and doing other stuff with Bradley. She texts back and says his mom's bill has been posted. We now see him standing in the rain with flowers. Norma walks out and he tries to give them to her. She says she has nothing to say to him. We see them dressed up and sitting on a couch. He asks when she'll look at him. She did but didn't say anything. A woman asked Norma to follow her. Another woman was talking about Summers not being happy they bought the motel. She says that explains why he would harass them. Norma asks how old she was. She says 33. She explains more about the situation. Norma says it sounds like you're trying to make up a story. The woman says she was charged with murder. She's talking about her defense. Norma says she doesn't need a defense because she didn't do it. She talks about the carpet fiber. Norma says he owned the motel for years. She tries to say she didn't do it and leaves. Alright, in the next scene, they're in a car together. Norman tells her she's being unreasonable. She tells him not to start. She asks what difference does it make to him and says he doesn't care about her. She brings up how he got laid that night. He explains Dylan said he should. And she says, oh, there's a surprise. She asks who it was, and she blames Dylan and he says that he was looking out for him. She says he's trying to turn him against her. He says no one can do that. She parks and asks how he could tell him their business. He says she scares him and says she might need help. She tells him to get out of the car. He tries to reason with her. She gets out and pulls him out, and she drives off. He starts walking. Dylan sees him and stops. He asks what he's doing out there. He says Norma kicked him out of the car. Dylan says welcome to the doghouse and tells him to hop on. They ride together. Norman seems to like it. Back at the house, Dylan asks why he got out. He tells him that's how she works. She makes a big fuss. He says she's not going to change. She lives for the drama. He basically tells him to walk away. Dylan then tells him he's getting his own place down by the beach. He tells him he should move in with him no matter what. Norman says she can't get through this without him. Dylan and Ethan are walking together. Dylan asks how much he thinks a place around there goes for. Ethan says depends. They get in Ethan's truck. Ethan gives him money for the place. Ethan says it's $5,000. A guy walks up to the truck. The guy pulls out a gun and shoots Ethan in the neck. Dylan drives him to the hospital. After he was helped, Dylan went outside and started running. Norma goes to Shelby. He says he's sorry. He says they have to not see each other for a while. She gets out. He stops her. He says he loves her. They kiss. He says he'll figure it out. Shelby goes to the police station. He asks a woman if Romero is back in yet. She says he's investigating a burglary. He asks her for some forms, and she goes in the back to get them. When she's gone, he starts messing with the evidence. She came back in and gave him the forms. We see Dylan driving. Well, he's driving Ethan's truck, for those that don't know. He sees the man that shot Ethan. He chases after him with the truck. Eventually, he runs him over. We see Emma on a computer. She's looking at a marine registration. Back at the house, we see Norma on their website. The phone rings and she answers. A woman named Rebecca, it's the same woman she was talking to earlier, said the case is over. She says she heard they lost the fiber sample. Norman was sitting on the stairs. He called Bradley. He leaves her a voicemail. Norma tells him the news. She tells him she's pretty sure it was Zach. He says Mr. Wonderful saves the day again and asks what he's going to make her do. He walks out. We see Norman walking down the stairs. Emma comes by and tells Norman to get in the car. She says she has an idea where the girl might be. He tells her to get him out of there. She took him to a place near the ocean. Emma asks if he wants to talk about it. He says no. He brings up the girl. She says she thought of different things that could have happened. He keeps checking his phone. She asks if something's wrong. He tells her he's sort of with Bradley now. She says that doesn't mean anything. Oh, for those that don't know, he mentioned sleeping with Bradley. She mentioned that Keith Summers owned a boat, and they go looking for the girl in the boat. They went in and looked around. Eventually, Norman opened a door and she was behind it. She started freaking out. Back at the motel, they take the girl to a room. Emma says they should clean her up a bit. Norman says he'll get a towel. We see Norma turning the lights off. She sees Emma's car parked. She started walking towards the room, and she comes in. She calls Norman and asks what's going on. He asks her to sit down, but she refuses. She wanted to know what they were doing in the motel room. Norman tells her this is the girl. Norma says he's making it up. He tells her to open her eyes. He tells her to ask her. The girl says he kept her in his house and forced her to have sex. She says there must be a mistake and says it can't be the same man. But she gets a newspaper. She says, this is not the man, right? And the girl looks scared and says, he's the man. Norma looked at Norman. Norman says he's sorry and says he told her. That's the end of episode 5 of Bates Motel. Yeah, I thought this was a pretty good episode. I like how the storyline is actually moving pretty fast. And it's pretty interesting too. Join me again next time for episode 6 of Bates Motel.